In this movie we will discuss calculations and the necessary steps to allow calculations to be performed. In any programming process, you can perform calculations with variables, constants, and some properties of certain objects. However, the properties of a text box cannot be used directly in calculations. You first must convert them to the correct data type. To do so, you use a method called parse. The parse method is used to convert the text property of a control to its numeric form before you use the value in a calculation. In this demonstration, we'll look at an example of how to use the parse method. Each of the numeric data type classes has a parse method, which you will use to convert text strings into the correct numeric value for that specific type. That is, the decimal class has a parse method, the integer class has a parse method, and so on. In the form that I have on the screen, you will note that there are two text boxes and a calculate button, and there's a label which will display the result of the calculation. To double-click the calculate button will expose the code that is present so far. And as you notice, if I simply try to place the result of a calculation in the label called answer label by simply adding the two text boxes together, I receive an error message which says the plus operator is not defined for text box data types. That is, by default, the text property of a text box is considered string data, not numeric data. Even though the user may type numbers in the text boxes themselves, those numbers are still treated as string data until you convert to the proper data type. So the first step is to create our variables. So I will create a couple of variables. And for this demonstration, I'll just keep the variable names very simple, num1 and num2. And as you notice, I've declared both of these variables to be of type integer. Now we can take the contents of the text boxes and parse them into these variables. The statement to do so looks like this, where you place the result of your parse into the variable num1. The actual method reads integer.parse and then put in parentheses the data that you wish to be converted to an integer data type. We need to do that for both of the numbers that we want to calculate. So again, it's num2 equals integer.parse, and then in parentheses the contents of the text box, which is stored in the text property of num2 text box. Now that we've converted the contents of the text box to integers and have placed the result of this conversion into variables num1 and num2 respectively, we now need to adjust our calculation statement to read answer label.text equals num1 plus num2. And immediately upon doing so, you notice the error message goes away. Now we should be able to perform the calculations correctly. Notice the process is a three-step process. First, declare your variables, then convert the contents of the text box to the appropriate data type, in this case integers, and then perform the actual calculation and place that answer in whatever label, in this case, that you would like to do so. If we run the program to test it, at runtime we can enter some data such as 89 and 23 and calculate, and as you can see we get the correct answer of 112. Returning to our code, if we wanted, on the other hand, to convert the data to decimal data type, we of course would have to first create decimal data types for our variables, so our variables would read decimal instead of integer, and instead of integer.parse it would read decimal.parse. But other than that, the syntax is the same whether you're using integer or decimal data types. Again, make sure you perform this process before you attempt to do the calculation. You will use the integer and decimal parse methods for most of the programs that you will need to perform. But just in case you need to convert to other data types, Visual Basic does have a parse method for each data class. For example, long, single, and double. The most important thing to remember is consistency.